Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Latte on Cloud Cost, the podcast that guides you through complex world of cloud cost optimization. I'm your host Praneet Chandra, and every 2 weeks we deep dive into the strategies, tools and best practices that helps FinOps professionals, engineering leaders and DevOps teams to navigate the financial aspects of cloud computing. In today's episode, we have got Avinash Gupta, Senior Director of Engineering at Physics Wallah, famously called as PW. If you definitely must have heard of it. He leads a platform engineering team at Physics Wallah along with multiple other product verticals. Also an ex-founder, comes with a lot of builder DNA. And welcome Avinash, how are you doing?
Hi, Praneet. Thanks for having me here. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about your role, like what you do at Physics Wallah, like what are the teams? I understand, right? You run a large part of platform, you have DevOps and several other teams with you, right? What does your role entail?
Sure. So I'm working here as Senior Director of Engineering and currently heading the platform team. So platform team at PW encompasses all the infrastructure of all the subsidiaries and the DevOps. Along with the platform team, I am heading a few other product verticals. One of them is revenue, which focuses on the marketplace and all the revenue initiatives at PW. Apart from that, I'm also heading the user engagement product vertical, which focuses on building engagement for our students onto the platform. Prior to Physics Wallah also, I have been part of another startup, which is Pasapolis, that was based out of Southeast Asia. And like you mentioned, so also I have had the opportunity to co-found a startup. So that was into retail domain.
Since you touched on Physics Wallah, and obviously we all know the scale, we have heard of it. So how does the cloud adoption looks like at Physics Wallah? Like what are the different cloud providers use? What is the extent of services as such? You can shed some light. Yeah.
Our primary motivation is towards achieving scalability, flexibility and efficiency of most of the things that we do. So we rely heavily on cloud providers. We are leveraging multiple cloud providers such as AWS, GCP. We are also using MongoDB Atlas, Confluent for our data streaming needs. We are also using OpenAI for powering our Latte suite. So overall, I think if I have to talk about primarily the decision making, so we tend to prioritize solutions which provide us low latency, high concurrency, and also cost efficiency is something which we heavily rely on for the such in any cloud solutions.
And just to understand, what's your ratio of DevOps to engineering teams, and is there any logical reasoning that you put through? And I will tell you why I asked this question, right? I've seen at a lot of companies, the DevOps are generally very thin on multiple engineers, 1:40, 1:30 ratio. And companies or a lot of leaders, just like you, right, always try to puzzle through like, hey, what is that correct ratio? And I think probably you folks are at a great place, right? So what is that ratio that looks like DevOps to engineering teams, and why do you have that? Yeah.
Right. So if I have to talk explicitly about DevOps team, so DevOps, so we have divided primarily our platform into two different segments. One is the DevOps and the second is the platform part of things, where we actually build to make things life easy for the developers as well as ourselves. So if I talk about the DevOps, which is generally the day-to-day operations for the developers, so we tend to have only 2 to 3 engineers working on it for the entire engineering team. But when we talk about platform as a whole, powering the automated rollbacks or the CI/CD pipelines, or making sure we have a DR strategy in place. So there the ratio, if you see, would be close to 1:15, I would say.
That's interesting. So, and then the reason is because you are at a side of platform where you really need to support a lot of teams, and that's why you've got this 1:15 kind of ratio in terms of doing things. Come to it.
Yeah, right. So it's not just PW, it's PW and all the subsidiaries. So we also have a lot of sister companies where we have to support the infrastructure for them. And so we are managing multiple AWS accounts. And if I have to talk about, in general, a lot of things that we work on. So this team is actually, responsible for infra. This is the team which is monitoring the complete stack. This is the team which is handling the load test, making sure the platform is scalable enough. So SREs are also part of this team. DBAs at certain point in time are also part of this team. So yeah, multiple hats for this team, I would say.
Yeah, wow, okay, that's interesting. There's a lot of things to tackle through, right? And that takes me to another question, right? What kind of initiatives and process you run, right, around infrastructure optimization and specifically, right, the interest on the cloud cost optimization, right? What are the initiatives that you run internally or you personally own at this point of time?
Right. So I'll probably start from very basic. So when we talk about our infrastructure as a whole, so we are heavily relying on Docker. So all our applications are containerized. So that kind of helps us making sure that the infra provisioning is very much optimized. We don't waste a lot of resources when we compare it container-based application versus you deploy it on ECS or any other format. So in general, we also we are kind of very conservative on information infrastructure provisioning. So we start with very basic provisioning for anything that we do. For example, let's say if we are provisioning a Kafka for the team or for any use case, we would start with very basic number of partitions, and we just make sure we have proper monitoring in place, and wherever possible we have auto scaling in place so that we can scale if needed to. And if let's say there are certain use cases, because we are at a very good scale, so we almost have a daily active user count of 2 million. So a lot of times what happens is we cannot actually go with basics. So we make sure that we have load tests in place, and there are proper proper reports that support why a particular provisioning is needed by a particular team. So we are very focused on those things. Then we also do scheduled scaling of our infrastructure. So the nature of the traffic that we have at Physics Wallah is basically so we have live classes which actually gets the most traffic onto the platform. So it would be a peaky traffic, I would say. So let's say if we have a class at 4 p.m, so that is when we get the highest scale onto the platform. So accordingly, we scale up the platform. That is completely automated. And during the night time when the traffic is low, so we downscale the platform. In general, on the cost side also, so we have been very aggressive in general. So we have multiple reports coming in, multiple alerts being generated on how we are doing at the cost side of things. So we have a daily report that tells us how our cost has changed from the previous day. Similarly, there is a weekly report, and then there is a monthly report where we we reconcile everything. We see how we have done in terms of cost for a particular let's say cloud service, be it AWS, be it any service we're using from GCP or MongoDB. So we analyze how much we have increased or decreased, and what are the causes for that, whether it is directly related to the traffic increase onto the platform, or is it some new use case that we have gone live with. So we tend to analyze all of that. One more thing that we have started recently is the infra asset tagging. So we are tagging all the infra assets that we have, and tagging it against the various engineering teams that we have. So we believe, cost cannot be the sole responsibility of one team in general, because you are not the direct consumer. So there are a lot of other developers, other teams who are actually using that infrastructure for their products. So giving them their monitoring. So I think a lot of times what happens is that engineering teams are actually unaware of what is the cost that they are causing to the infrastructure. So the idea is to give them a visibility and then hold them accountable for the cost that they are actually generating. So apart from that, so we also do a lot of internal sessions to make sure that the developers, they are aware of various best practices around cost. For example, data transfer. That's something it's very difficult to identify why you are getting cost on data transfer, but then there are certain best practices that you follow that can actually help you minimize the cost. So ultimately, instead of going reactive there, once we observe if the cost has increased, we are following more of a proactive approach, where we are also helping the developers learn and make sure that they take the right decisions when they develop.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I really like that concept of making all the teams accountable. And this is like, I personally, in my capacity, I keep on preaching, right? I keep on saying this thing, right? Hey, it's everyone's job to optimize costs, right? It cannot be just left to a certain team. Yes, there could be governance set up and everything, but I think you've done a brilliant job with driving this cost-centric culture in your organization, right? Like everyone is accountable, everyone knows where they're spending, and then they can come to you, right? Okay, what are the remediation, right? So I think that's a great approach, right? Altogether. Now that makes me come to a very interesting point, and this is one of my favorite questions I ask to everyone. What are some common misconceptions about cloud cost optimization, right? And you must have heard of a lot of them, but what are your top picks? What people keep on saying, right? This is how the cloud cost optimization should be. Like, what is that common misconception that you've heard?
So I think one of the major misconceptions I've seen is people believe that cost optimization is a one-time task. They'll set goals in a particular quarter or at times a monthly goal, and they'll look at the cost and they'll start optimizing it, and then they would just leave it. What I believe is that this is an ongoing activity. Until and unless you are looking at the cost every day, every month, you're not going to run a cost optimized cloud or infrastructure for that matter. So here long-term initiatives also play a very big role. So I might be optimized now, but what happens when this cost let's say increase to 50% of its capacity right now? So you need to have long-term plans in place, because there's always a short-term things that you can do to remediate the cost immediately, but then there is always scope where you cannot do things immediately. It might require changes from, let's say, multiple teams. So those would generally be long-term initiatives, and that has to be planned early so that you can make most out of it when actually your cost starts increasing. Then another thing I have also seen is that since we are talking about cost optimization, there's an enterprise support that a lot of cloud providers provide. So I have seen people considering that that is like a waste of money. But I personally believe that having a good enterprise support, of course the enterprise support has to be good. Not every cloud provider provides that kind of support. But if the support that the cloud provider is providing is very good, that helps a lot, because we have been working very closely with some of our partners, and they actually pinpoint a lot of things if we are not doing things the right way, or in general also they are actually very proactive in terms of supporting us in reducing our cloud bill on their platform. Because I think most of the cloud providers have also realized that it's not a monthly thing that's going to be a game changer for them, but it's long-term commitments, having a long-term relationships. So that's one thing. And I think another major misconception I have seen is that cloud optimization or the cost optimization can only be done on compute or database by just downscaling them. So I would say that this is just one part of it. There are a lot of things. For example, I talked about data transfer. So that that is that can add to crazy cost if you don't look at it while building the solutions. Especially if you have multi-easy deployment, multi-region deployments, then I think data transfer cost is something that needs to be considered.
And then what are the key metrics that your teams track for cloud or infra optimization, right? What are the key metrics? How do you measure, like, hey, we are at our goal, or when you're doing budgeting, right? Hey, this is what our budget should look like. So what are those metrics that you track?
So at a very high level, we talk about cost in absolute numbers. So we don't really say that, let's just decrease the cost by 10% or 20%. Because cost in general is very it changes quite frequently when you are running an infrastructure of such a scale. A lot of things change from time to time. A lot of new use cases would come in. You might have a probably a spiky season where a lot of traffic is coming in, that might change your cost. So we always rely on we target absolute numbers for our cost. Uh, Apart from that, so in general, so we rely on a lot of things for example, when we talk about resource provisioning, so there are two things that we rely on. One is, let's say if you have certain number of replicas running for a particular application, so how is the consumption around CPU and memory? So that gives us an idea on the amount of resources being utilized and then the amount of resources not being used. So if there is a scope to downscale, that is one thing we do regular audits on and keep a track of. Another thing is resource provisioning. So apart from actually seeing whether the application is able to utilize the resource available to it, we also monitor whether the resources are getting waste or not. For example, if we have multiple pods running on one VM, so what percentage of the VM resource is not being allocated at all? So there is certain percentage of resources being wasted. They're not even allocated, so we can definitely not use it. So that is another thing that we track. Another is the storage cost. So storage plays a very big role for us. So since we are into edtech space, so a lot of content is actually generated on a daily basis. We have multiple live classes running the entire day so we have more like 43 exam categories that we teach students in. So and then there are 200k students studying simultaneously in live classes. So in general, storage cost is very ever increasing for us. So that is something we track very diligently. Apart from that, cloud waste is another thing. So let's say a lot of times there are resources which are provisioned but not being used. So we keep a track of such things and make sure that we decommission them from time to time. Apart from that, there is another metric that that is very important, but again very subjective. So that is the unit cost per customer. So here I think it's a very good number to understand how much you are spending on serving a per customer. So that is very subjective because your cost might be or might not be directly related to the amount of users or the amount of activity onto the platform. So that is why I say it is very subjective, and it's a good number to track, and we can always set targets on, let's say I want to reduce my cloud cost per customer from X to Y. So yeah, I think that's a very good metric in general.
This point that you put in the last bit, right? Cost per customer, cost per interaction as such is like a really, really great cost. And I think a lot of companies do suffer with that. Like I recall one of my experience, we wanted to amortize what is actually our team is spending on infrastructure because people cost is easy. Yeah. Okay, you have got 10 engineers, this is what the salary looks like, it is that. But when you amortize the infrastructure against like number of users or per account or per customer in your case, I think it is very tricky, right? What is the right balance? And I think if you measure it over a period of time, then only you get to know if it is actually giving you any kind of ROI, right? So I think, yes, that's a great point. And in fact, this is something that in my previous podcast with Victor, we were talking about what are the common thing that companies miss out, right? And they miss out this exact thing that they don't understand what is that unit cost of their cloud infrastructure is going per user or per customer as such. And I think that's a great way to measure that. And I think that's a great thing to even reduce as well, right, over a period of time. Great. Now, this comes to my favorite question. What are tips for people and companies starting in cloud optimization journey? What are your top tips? Top 3 tips, that's more than enough. Yeah.
So I think building the visibility is the first thing and the basic thing. So until unless you know how you're spending, how are your cost patterns, are you trending with time, whether it is increasing or decreasing, how your cost is distributed across multiple services that you're using, and even if you can actually get a breakup of the services as well. For example, if I talk about storage, so storage is usually charged on the amount of content that you have stored. Apart from that, it is being you also pay for the number of requests that you actually make to these objects, and then you also pay for the data transfer if you are directly, let's say, having calls, taking the data out of S3 directly. So having this understanding becomes the foremost thing where, if you don't have this visibility, I don't think you can move any step forward in your optimization journey. Apart from that, I think having regular audits in general, right? So making sure that you're actually monitoring. So first thing that I mentioned was around visibility, right? Then comes the next step where you are actually auditing that. So you are actually having regular audits where you are viewing the cost. You are actually analyzing it from time to time, sitting and discussing how do you actually reduce a particular thing. How do you reduce, let's say, the data transfer cost or the compute, or what action items can the team take. And then you also put in dedicated efforts to make sure that you achieve your goal. And then I think taking the large impact items, that is also one thing that people tend to miss generally, and that becomes very important because like I was mentioning earlier also, if we are actually just focusing on short-term items, you will actually lose big when your cost starts growing. So how do you, for example, evaluating how do you cut down your S3 cost to half, or how can you reduce the CDN cost. So I mean, CDN for us, CDN becomes very important because all of our content is actually streamed by a CDN to these two types. So talking about and actually brainstorming and actually taking maybe 6 months goal or even a yearly goal to probably reduce CDN cost by 30%, that's I think a very big target in general. So such aggressive targets, such aggressive measures needs to be taken by the teams who actually want to optimize their cloud cost.
Great. I think it's a brilliant framework, right? Where you keep on assessing what your cloud looks like in terms of visibility, and then you keep on reviewing, right? What in my audit and everything, and then act on it, right? By taking up goals. I think that's a great way of looking at it, right? This SS review act as a framework. I think that's great. And that brings us to end of this podcast. Thank you, Avinash. Thanks for coming onto this one. Much appreciated. Right. And that wraps up another episode of the Latte on Cloud Costs. I hope you have gained some valuable insights that you can apply to your own cloud cost optimization effort. Until then, keep optimizing and may your cloud costs always trend downward. This is Praneet Chandra signing off from the Latte on Cloud Costs. Thank you, everyone.